And that person has their own personal problems at home, have their problems at work. They're going through different crises, different traumas. There could be post-traumatic stress. It could be effects of long COVID after years and years. We don't know what it is. But nevertheless, if you want your team to work harder, if you want your team to feel that they want to be there and that they really support you, the only way that you're going to do it is by making them feel valued, worthwhile, and cared for. Be kind. I mean, it's those kinds of words that we're using today. So whereas when I started using these words years ago, it was, don't talk about kindness, Carole. I say, we're going to talk about kindness. We're going to talk about caring. Because if you care for another human being, it makes all the difference in the world.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, a hospitality-specific podcast dedicated to challenging mental health stigma and conversations designed to inspire a new, healthier, happier, and more sustainable hospitality profession. The Burnt Chef Journal is proudly sponsored by Planday, the workforce management system that helps your business give a shift. From scheduling rotas ahead to tracking time and attendance, managing your team's careers to managing your budgets, Planday has everything you need to make your day work in one easy-to-use platform. Try it yourself with a 30-day free trial only at planday.com. Get your shift together with Planday. Okay, so this week we are joined by Carole Spiers, who is a British entrepreneur, public speaker, and author, best known for her work in the field of stress management, counseling, and employee well-being. So I think we should say, Carole, at this stage that you are the founder and CEO of the Carole Spiers Group, which is an international stress management employee counseling consultancy. And also you're the chair of the International Stress Management Association, which is obviously a registered charity and a lead professional body for workplace stress management, and launched National Stress Awareness Day in 1999. So we've got a lot to talk about, and I think our audience will probably guess what the subject is this week, which will be really relevant. But first and foremost, how are you doing?
Absolutely fine, and thank you for the welcome. And I'm absolutely delighted to be with the Burnt Chef Project. Really, really delighted. And I really admire the work that you do as well, Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We've had a couple of conversations offline, and hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit more together. But for the benefit of the audience here, how did you get into being such an expert in the field of stress? And when did this happen as well?
It happened many years ago. I was at the time working as a Samaritan. I was a Samaritan actually for over 21 years. And during that time, I actually trained to become a professional counsellor. That's where my work was. Then personal circumstances changed my end. I divorced, couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, and had to set up a business, so set up Carole Spiers Group. And it was at that point that I decided, well, I couldn't really afford to stay in the voluntary sector the whole time, still stay with the Samaritans because they are very, very close to my heart. And the decision then was, well, how can you take what you do and what you know into industry? And it didn't happen, Chris, just like that overnight. Everybody says, oh, you're so lucky. It wasn't a question of lucky. It wasn't a question of like, oh, yes, it all just happened. It doesn't just happen in the slightest. It takes a lot of hard grafting and more hard grafting. And as you know, more hard grafting as well. So it takes all of that. So therefore, people have always been my main raison d'etre. And I've seen over the years with the clients that I've had that realistically people are really in a situation where they need to feel valued, worthwhile, have a sense of purpose. So really, I took all of that feeling that I had and I walked into industry. And of course, you don't just walk into industry. You have lots of doors closing in your face to start off with. And then gradually over the years, people started listening to me, and I was saying, we need to talk about stress reduction. We need to talk about mental health. And at that time, Chris, people would say, no, Carole, we can't talk about mental health. We can't use those words. And I said, watch this space, because that's exactly what we are going to be doing. And of course, now, fast forward all those years, we talk about stress and mental health, maybe not as much as we could. However, we're certainly talking about it far more than we ever have done before. So my work in industry didn't just happen. It was then getting people on side, talking to them and saying to them, people are really your most valuable asset, and you need to be able to manage them. And the people say, well, okay, well, talk to me more. And it was really a matter of, at that point, of actually trying to work out what could be done, what training courses could be arranged, what counselling services could be arranged. And as an organisation, we started providing counselling services, not just with me. I grew a team of people, and we had counselling services for industry, which we still have today in 2024. So yes, that is really a quick trip into my background.
That is impressive. And you mentioned in passing about sort of resilience and things that don't just happen. It takes a lot of work. One of the hardest things, I think, in the line of work that we do here at the Burnt Chef Project, and I'm sure you'll empathize with this, is that what we talk about is intangible, in terms of you can't see it, you can't touch it, and trying to explain the benefits of this to business owners and also to individuals as well is one of our hardest things, because they're like, well, prove the ROI, or if we can't see it, then does it really exist? So how did you go from, I'm going to talk about this and I think it's important, to businesses really grabbing hold of this and going, hold on a second, this should be as part of our strategy for the next few years at least? It
was a really tough, and still is a tough call. So there's no miracle. There's no miracle here. One has to get to people who are going to be keen to listen to what you say, who buy into what you say. A lot of this is a feeling, a philosophy, a belief, a vision. Well, what's the ROI on a vision? Well, yes, it means important we communicate. Yeah, got that. What's the ROI, Carole, on communicating? What's the ROI on listening to people, which is what I do talk about a huge amount. So it's quite hard, and it still is. It still is, even though there is more data, even though we are speaking about it more than we used to, it's still an upward struggle. It is still an uphill struggle to do that. So yes, are we talking about stress more than we were? Yes. Do we talk about the importance of resilience more? Yes. And do we actually have a situation where people need to feel valued? Well, yes is the answer to that as well. And when you get all those yeses, then you get to the point where people are saying, well, okay, let's start listening to what she's saying. But you still have to prove yourself. And it takes somebody normally at the top to say things like, I believe in what she's saying. I believe it's important. We do need to value our people. People are not expendable. So therefore, you get to that situation where realistically, that's where people need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, it's that senior leader buy-in, right? If you haven't got the very top brass interested in what you're having to say about this, and actually not just looking at the facts and the figures, but knowing it is the right thing to do as well, then it is such a hard trajectory to be able to get a decent strategy in place that focuses on the health and well-being of teams. Have you found with the Carole Spiers group that you've had any surprising wins where perhaps a senior leader isn't bought into stress management techniques and mitigating stress within the workplace, yet the teams have somehow overturned this from a peer level?
I usually find when something has changed 360 degrees, it's normally because the person stroke people at the top, they're the ones that decide that there's something in what she's saying. That could be they've gone through a crisis themselves. It could be that they then have the empathy and feel for what it is that I'm saying and what I'm talking about. And when I talk to them about training your managers to be leaders and training those managers to be leaders and listeners at the same time, and putting the word listening and leadership in the same sentence, they may say, well, I wasn't quite sure what she was talking about. Actually, she's turned, it works. So when you actually can train a manager, a senior leader, those at the top, the C-suite team, and they actually buy into what you're saying. I'm not saying the rest is easy. I am saying you need to get that. How do you get that? Well, your question was, could it be management who are geared up, and then you can get them the management trying to encourage the senior team? You can get it that way around, but it's usually the people at the top. It's usually something happens, you track it back. Why now would be always the question. And you very often hear something like maybe somebody's had a bereavement, somebody's been through, a son, a daughter, a wife, husband has been through a critical time. They may have burnt out. They may have experienced mental health issues. Then all of a sudden you're talking to different people. from what we're having to, inverted commas, sell yourself. You're not having to do that, because what they're saying is, Carole, how can you help us? And I said, there are ways we can actually do that. It could be training, it could be counseling, it could be mental health first aiders, but we have to put people number one, first and foremost, on the top of your list.
I agree. Let's give the listeners a little bit of stats and info, because they're similarly to yourselves. We do find it's not until the proverbial, and we can swear on this podcast, the shit hits the fan when someone has got personal experience, whether that's professionally or personally, that all of a sudden they're then locked into understanding the reasons why this is important. But for those who perhaps haven't had the personal experience of chronic stress or illness related to stress, what are the data, not just in the UK, but obviously for our global listeners here, what's the data saying about stress and our relationship with illness, with chronic stress?
Okay, I haven't got specific figures, but you've only got to look up in terms of what there is available. So you can talk about 17.5 million working days lost due to work-related stress and anxiety and depression. Do you know something? The figures are relevant. Of course they're relevant, Chris, but do you know something at the end as well, is that as much as the figures are relevant, and every country's going to have their own figures, what's more important is to realize that if 17.5 working days are lost due to stress, anxiety, and depression, behind every one of those statistics is a person. Because otherwise, it's just another statistic, whether it's 17, whether it's 27, whether it's 37. Is it relevant? Yes, it's relevant, because you want to see whether we're on the right trajectory or not. But behind every statistic is a human being. And when you think of it like that, it always stops you to think. And you think to yourself, gosh, that's absolutely right. It is a person that we're talking about. And that person has their own personal problems at home, have their problems at work. They're going through different crises, different traumas. There could be post-traumatic stress. It could be effects of long COVID after years and years. We don't know what it is. But nevertheless, if you want your team to work harder, if you want your team to feel that they want to be there and that they really support you, the only way that you're going to do it is by making them feel valued, worthwhile, and cared for. Be kind. I mean, it's those kinds of words that we're using today. So whereas when I started using these words years ago, it was, don't talk about kindness, Carole. I said, we're going to talk about kindness. We're going to talk about caring. Because if you care for another human being, it makes all the difference in the world. You may not be able to pay that person any more money. They may want it, but you may not be able to do it. However, if you're kind, caring, understanding, give empathy, make that person feel or help that person feel valued and worthwhile and not just another number, then all of a sudden, then what's going to go up? Very simple. Performance, productivity is going to go up. They're going to trust you. They're going to want to come to work. They're going to give you extra. So you're going to get your pounds of flesh from them. And what does it cost you? Virtually, we are on a zero budget. And that's the scariest part of all of it. Because what I've said to you is zero budget. Okay, maybe some training. Because everybody can be trained. Everybody can be trained to listen and listen attentively. Everybody can be trained not to be on the phone at the same time as they're talking to somebody. Everybody can be trained. It shouldn't be a training, but it is, Chris. It is a training issue. And with technology as it is today and where we are, the answer is the phone overtakes everything because we're addicted to our phones. Imagine you're sitting with somebody across the table and the phone rings. You don't ignore it. That person has disturbed you, has interrupted you, but you actually take that phone call over and above the person that you're speaking to. But that's what we do. So really, we have to manage the technology that we have. We have to manage our lives. Our phones are part of our lives. We're strapped to our phones. It is another part of us. So yes, is that meaningful? It's more than meaningful.
And it's quite a profound point, isn't it, really? Like, we heavily rely upon proving our impact with our stats and data and percentages and numbers. But actually, when you take out of it the fact that it doesn't matter if it's 55,000 modules completed for free, what actually matters is that that individual has used that information or has benefited from it from professionally or personally, which has then enriched their connections and relationships with those around them, which has then had a profound knock-on effect to that. And then all of a sudden, you've got that butterfly effect, right? You've got that mass impact because it's just that it's that knowledge and it's that gaining that experience. And as you say, technology-wise, we raised quite an interest. We did a Burn Brunch networking event recently, which is something we've just started up and we're hoping to move around the world. And one of the subjects was Gen Zs and how Gen Z aren't resilient anymore. Gen Z, you know, they're just not built like they used to be. But actually, we met an incredibly interesting young lady who was a Gen Z. And she said, well, hold on, what do you mean we're not resilient? And I said, I'm literally just repeating what I've heard. I said, I don't tend not to cast like dispersions like that. And she said, how many of you guys have had to be brought up in a world where you're always contacted by your boss on your day off via WhatsApp and he expects you to respond within like half an hour? And I said, oh God, yeah, come to think of it, actually. She goes, so we have to be resilient. Like we're always having to be resilient because we have to learn to rebuff that digital, just that way of contacting. I mean, how much of digital technology do you think is without you using science and stats, how much of that is a detriment to people who are trying to combat their stress levels?
I think it's huge. I mean, when I say it's huge, technology has its place. There's lots of apps that help you to get up from your desk when you're sitting there for too long, apps that make you go for a walk, apps that talk to you about getting hold of the dog and just going out. There are apps for everything. But what technology is doing now, it's just we are addicted to it. So therefore, you cannot go out without your phone. And I might say to a client, go for a walk without your phone. It's a bit like shock horror. Go to bed at night and don't have your phone next to the side of your bed. Can't possibly do that because that is my alarm call. I say, well, actually, you know something? You can buy yourself an alarm clock. Oh, God, leave your phone outside. So we're doing the same for our kids. Our kids as well are being brought up in the same way. They only understand one thing, which is the phone. So for us as adults, we are drawn to our phones because we are addicted. We're addicted to our phones. And we're addicted to what it gives us. It is our lifeline, whether it's our music, whether it's our podcast, whether it's our emails, whether it's somebody getting hold of us at WhatsApp at 3:00 in the morning. We are addicted to them. So therefore, we need to manage them. Let's just take the great out of it. We have got a phenomenal tool. So that part of that's our phones and our computers. It just means that we have to actually manage. We have to manage that. We have to be disciplined. Because imagine a situation where you're on your emails and you're typing away and you're maybe writing a report. All of a sudden, another email pops up. You are totally drawn to the whoosh, to whatever the sound is that tells you there is an email waiting for you. So you then go and deal with that. You come back to what you were doing. And if you say these words of now, where was I? The answer is you've been interrupted. Multiply that interruption by 1,000 people in your workforce. 2,000 people in the workforce. I think you can see where I'm going to. The answer is interruptions are costing a huge amount of time. And then people get stressed because they're not working as well as they could be. So I think that technology is amazing. It's phenomenal. Didn't have phones years and years ago. So certainly people sometimes say to me, Carole, you set your business up before the mobile phone. I said, yeah, before computers. It's amazing really how we did manage that. But I did. I ran a very successful business and I managed the phone box. It's what you get used to. So therefore, was it successful? Yes. And we still use phones today. Samaritans, 116-123 is the phone number of the Samaritans. You can call the Samaritans. We need them to be there. So therefore, what I'm saying is that it is a phenomenal tool. The phone is amazing. It takes you to where you want to go. It can take you to Australia in a second. We know that. We need to have to be disciplined. We need to have to manage it. And we need to have to manage our distractions and be aware that we are addicted to it. Because that noise, whatever your ringtone is, whatever ringtone you've decided for one person or another person or different ringtones or not, you have to translate which ringtone is. Do I want to speak to that person or not? Yes, we are addicted. And I think that we have to manage that. We have to teach our children to manage it. We have to teach our grandchildren to manage it. There's a role and responsibility that we all have. And do we translate that into industry? Yes, because every manager expects their team to be 24/7 accessible. Is that fair, right, the right thing to do? No, but that's what industry is dictating. So therefore, there needs to be boundaries. There need to be guidelines. There needs to be, I would say, maybe a policy. There needs to be a conversation that takes place between the manager and his stroke her team. Because in this situation, Chris, now where so many of us are working in a hybrid way, then for many people are at home, and the manager may think to themselves, okay, well, it used to be lights out at 5 o'clock. Just turn the lights of the factory out at 5 o'clock. End of the day. See you tomorrow at 8:30 or 8 o'clock. Now it's very different, because now you may choose to collect your kids from school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, have your hours break or an hour and a half break at that point, and work 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. You may choose to do that. Absolutely fine. The only question is your boss aware of that? Because the boss may have been brought up on, no, lights out at 5 o'clock. I'm not emailing anybody after 5 or 6 o'clock. But then there's me at home thinking, I'd really like you to be talking to me. So this all comes down to listening and having a conversation. What do people like Carole want? I'd actually like to, on a Wednesday, I'd like to be able to answer my emails at 9 o'clock at night. I want to do that. So John says, okay, if that's what you want, we can do it. Now, how's John going to find out? Only by having that conversation. So the hybrid way of working has brought its strengths and it's brought its challenges. It's also brought its challenges as far as communications are concerned. Is it so easy to communicate in like we are now on a podcast? Or would it be nice to do it around the coffee machine and sit and chat, where some of the greatest chats have taken place around the coffee machine? A, we probably don't have a coffee machine anymore. And B, there's probably not enough people in there to warrant a coffee machine. So then are you going to get a water cooler, which is better for the health? I think you get my drift. It's really saying how we had the work that we had years ago, the working environment we had years ago. So in the early 1990s, what I'm talking about, was different. Doesn't mean it was all great. It was different. And there were different challenges then as there are now. So to be aware of the challenges, we need to be. And also we need to put in boundaries so when people know and they must switch off. You can go out for a walk, put an app on your phone, which tells you how to meditate and mindfulness and all of this. Yeah, you can do that. So use technology to its best, but be aware that we also need to be able to switch off from it.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I mean, I was thinking whilst you were talking about, because I was also brought up before the days of mobile phones. And I remember the first time when I had, I think, £5 credit on my Motorola phone and it ran out. And I remember this feeling of dread and like, oh my God, I've been disconnected.
Yes.
I've been disconnected. And that sudden paranoia and that panic and that anxiety. And then you had to run all the way down to the shops and pick up the card. And for those who are listening to this, haven't got a clue what I'm talking about, but you have to buy a little card, scratch off the back, put in a number when you made a phone call and you get your credit back. But that lack of dopamine, that withdrawal, it was instantaneous because you suddenly realized you didn't have it.
Yeah.
But I guess using some of your examples, I think hospitality is quite a unique environment in respect that it probably hasn't changed a great deal since the 80s and 90s. And we still have coffee machines. Use of technology has improved, but you'll still get service from a human being and the food is still being prepared 9 times out of 10 by a human being in the back end. So what sort of suggestions have you seen work in busy environments? Because construction sites are pretty similar as well, aren't they? You can't get away from the fact that you need people to use power tools, etc. So what have you found works well in those environments where you are constantly being micro-prompted by lots of different stressors, lots of different distractions, and yet you're expected to perform to a high and safe standard?
I think one of the keys to what you're saying is to make sure that people take breaks for themselves, not to think that they can really continue without any break. I think that needs to be built into their schedule. It needs to be built into their diary and their calendars. There can be nothing more important. So it's A, for the bosses to be aware, but B, for the people to be aware themselves. It's not a sign of weakness to say, I need some help. It's not a sign of weakness to say, I need a break. But when you're talking about hospitality, which is really a very high pressured environment, which it is. So therefore, there needs to be this communication between everybody, that people look out for each other. Because really, if you're working in a team, you need to be able to do that. That's if someone's not top form, why are they not in top form? Can they stop what they're doing? Not necessarily. And that's the challenge with hospitality, because it's really, it's high adrenaline the whole time. It's having to deliver. You don't really get that point where you can necessarily, that breather automatically happens to you. Maybe you sometimes need to take it. You need to listen to your bodies and to be aware that I actually need 5 minutes. Even if it's just 5 minutes, that could actually help. So 5-minute breathers can help, but it's knowing that you need those breathers. But you mentioned construction, you mentioned hospitality. There are plenty of other industries where you've got exactly that dependency. Everybody's dependent on me. If you're working in a kitchen and person A isn't delivering, then person B has a knock-on effect all the way through. So therefore, everybody has their part to play. And it's part of that is build your resilience to manage it. Is that going to happen overnight? Not necessarily so, but it's an ongoing situation. But in the 1990s, Chris, hospitality has always been high pressurized, always been.
If you're enjoying this week's episode, consider heading over to our website and supporting our ongoing work in destigmatizing mental illness and creating a healthier, happier, and more sustainable industry by purchasing some of our branded merchandise. We have a whole range of t-shirts, hoodies, chef's jackets, wellbeing journals, plus a whole host more available on worldwide dispatch. All funds raised from sales of these items go towards free-to-access e-learning content, as well as providing free support systems and help for those who may be experiencing difficulty with their mental health.
Because people want to eat, people want to, hotels to go to. Hospitality has always had that. So therefore, what have you learned? I mean, I'm not sure. What would you say has been the learning, Chris, over the years since the 1990s?
Well, the learning in terms of stress management?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's more awareness, such as your day, and the HSE brought in a legal requirement to have work-related stress risk assessments. However, in the hundreds and maybe even thousands of businesses that I've been into over the last 4 years, I've only ever seen 2 workplace risk assessments. So when you ask what sort of learning has there been in terms of stress management, it's I wouldn't say it's high, which is one of the key reasons why our turnover rates are anywhere between 60 to 125% in our sector, because we get to the stage where you don't feel you're being listened to. Your general manager or your director's under pressure constantly, so they don't have that one-on-one time. They can't demonstrate empathy because their emotional intelligence has been thwarted by stress as well. More conflict happens and arises within the workplace environment. More mistakes are made, more illnesses occur, more people are exhibiting presenteeism because the culture is not to let person number 2 down. So you continue to work through physiological and psychological impacts of high stress. And yet businesses still aren't addressing this. They're not addressing the root causes. See, in my head, I thought, and I'd be interested to learn from your experience actually, in my head, I thought that, and I always talk about working in hospitality is like the Olympics, right? And the Olympics were recently. The main thing about the Olympics is that you wouldn't expect an Olympian to swim 200 meters or to run 200 meters, stop, have a quick cigarette, maybe some carbs, a quick shot of espresso, and then to do it again, and then to do it again, and to do it again, and always be better than the last time. That Olympian would be given the right food, nutrients, vitamins. They would be taken to the ice bath. They would have the massage. They'd have a medical examination. Any tweaks, they'd be told, that's it, rest. Don't make them or aggravate them any worse. Yet in hospitality, we do expect people to run mile after mile.
Yeah.
And have that espresso. We're not feeding the bodies and the brains with the right things, the right rests, the right food and nutrients, the right level of water. So have you found any sector or any specific profession that really has done a great job of nailing, or at least starting to tackle, the subject of stress mitigation within workplaces? Has there been anything that stands out in your mind that goes, that would be a great idea of hospitality?
I'm not sure I could come up with a particular sector. It normally comes down to individual people as to why they choose to do that. The individual person who's thinking to themselves, we can't keep pressurizing our people too much, because if we keep doing it, then eventually they're going to break. Pull an elastic band too far, what happens? Very simply, it breaks. So therefore, is there a particular sector? I wouldn't say specifically a sector. There are some organizations who I'd say who are slower in actually putting forward what we're saying here. I think that, yes, it comes down to individuals. It comes back to the ethos. If I think of the clients who I work with, and don't forget, the only clients I'm going to work with are those who value what I'm saying. But you might get somebody, what's quite interesting, as being a public speaker, what's quite interesting is if I'm at a conference and I'm talking about the ethos of what I'm talking about and my vision for the future, to get somebody who hadn't bought into what I was saying beforehand and who listens to me and then comes over to me and says, I'm interested. I'm not saying they're going to go ahead with anything that I've said, but I'm interested to talk further. That is very, very satisfying. What sector are they? It could be any sector. This is the point, because we're talking about people. So can we say that the hospitality industry is more pressurized? That we can say because of the expectations. So do you need to address that even more so? Then yes, you do. But therefore, the medical profession, there are so many other professions that are pressurized. It would seem now in 2024 that we're more pressurized than ever. And we know that if you have too much pressure, it becomes stress. And a lot of people say things to me like, oh, Carole, stress is good for you, isn't it? And I'll say, no. And they say, well, a little bit of stress is good for you. And I say, well, actually, no. And I'll say, okay, what's the answer? Well, the answer very simply is pressure is good for you and stress is not, which means what is stress? It's too much pressure. Can we be aware of that too much pressure? We have to look at this preventatively. We have to go preventatively, because otherwise people are going to burn out. And when then people burn out, then all of a sudden people are listening to you. Why? Because it's costing the organization money. So if you burn out, you're no longer working. You're stuck under your duvet at home. You're not going to be any help to anybody. It's costing the organization time and money to pay you and to bring in somebody else. Or if people really can't hack the organization, they're going to vote with their feet. So how can one make the high pressurized industries work better? Well, I'm going to say to you, as much as hospitality is high profile and it is fast and it is immediate, there are plenty of other industries in the same way. It's not an unusual situation. And the most important thing is, and I know you do this globally, is to actually get other countries together so they can say, what is working for you? What is our learning? Because in some ways, we're not recreating the wheel. So in some ways, it's really saying what works in Australia may or may not be the same as what works in Brussels. So what is working? And what can we take? What learning can we take? Now, you mentioned that I'm CEO of a stress and mental health charity. Yes. And I've been in that role for many, many years. And I set up Stress Awareness Day in 1998. So it's a long time ago. Who would have thought all those years later, I would still be talking about stress. I would still talking about resilience and how to manage pressure and how to switch off. But even though we're talking about it more, and we are, it's an ongoing process. You may say to me, Carole, where are we going to be in 10 or 20 years' time? And I'd say to you, probably still talking about it. There'll be other challenges because you've then got AI coming into the picture. Is that going to take away jobs or not? All sorts of things we're talking about today, which you weren't talking about before. It's different. But stress, as sure as eggs are eggs, stress is not going to go away. Question is, how can we manage pressure before it gets to stress?
Proactive rather than reactive, right?
Totally.
It's one of the best things that we've always said about hospitality is it is incredibly reactive. If you have a last minute problem, we're very good at turning on a dime and getting it fixed. If it's a table of 10 that walk in when it was meant to be 2, then we can deal with that quite quickly. But I think that neurologically, that trains us into being quite like in the spur of the moment, and it doesn't give us that brain space to go, okay, so this is happening, but what could we do to stop this from happening in future? It allows us to be in the moment, and especially with adrenaline, that does very well. So from your perspective then, whether that's personally or professionally, what sort of things have you found helps build resilience and helps allow you that time to start to reduce personal levels of stress?
Okay, there's two things that come out of that to help that person to reduce stress. Let's just go back to something you mentioned before in terms of hospitality. If we choose the right people to go into hospitality, the person job fit, there could be nothing more important. It's the same with the police force in terms of any other organization. So therefore, that is important. And I think that if you've got that, then you've got a chance to actually have the right people. Can that person turn on a sixpence and actually just get on with what they need to get on with quickly and manage productively at that particular point? Then they should be able to do that. But you just try to find the right person. Some people are not the right people to be in that particular job. And it doesn't matter how many times you talk to them about take some time for yourself, go out for a 5-minute walk, leave your phone behind, chill out, just do some meditation, just do some mindfulness. That is fine if they're in the right job. If they're not in the right job, then you're pushing treacle up the hill. It's not going to work. So really, can people take responsibility? That's first and foremost. People need to take responsibility for themselves. They need to say, is this the right job? What else do I actually need? Who else can I speak to? What help do I need? What support do I need? Am I going home at night, not being able to barely even sleep because I'm so stressed out? What should I be doing? What should I be saying? I'm going to put responsibility back to the individual, because the manager can't necessarily, the manager's there to maintain continuity, to be listening. The manager cannot be all things to all people. First of all, they're not always trained, which becomes a training need. It does. But second of all, they're not a mind reader. So if you're not feeling well, if there's something that's not right for you, if there's something that's not working for you, it is up to you to say, this is not working. Not suggesting while you're firefighting. I'm not suggesting at that point. But I am saying to make time, so you actually make time for your manager. Now, your manager's busy. This is the difficult thing. The manager's always busy. Does the manager have time to listen to you? Probably not. Can you be strong enough and resilient enough to say, I need to speak to you, which takes some doing when you know that your manager is extremely, extremely busy and can't even breathe themselves. You've got no alternative. There's no alternative. It's either that or, as I said before, you end up voting with your feet, which means you become an absenteeism statistic, or you become somebody who's just left the organization. And you just don't want to lose your trained personnel. It takes you years and years to train people, get them working in a way that you want them to be working, where it's working. And all of a sudden, somebody leaves. Why did nobody notice that? What was the writing on the wall? And then you hear of, God forbid, and then you hear of situations where people take their own lives. Why did we not see that? What happened? What was the last thing that person said? Was that person crying out? Did we not hear what they said? Well, yes, we were busy. I get that. But most of industry today is busy. So there's no miracle cure. It's down to, there's not the responsibility of stress is dual. There's the responsibility of the organization, which is the manager, and the responsibility of the individual. They both need to talk to each other. And so there's a dual responsibility. People very often think and say, well, Carole, are you putting everything on the doorsteps of managers? No. Yes, managers have got a huge responsibility. And yes, they need training. Yes, they do. Because if you send a manager out with no training and no EQ skills, how do you expect them to be able to listen to anybody? And then you get a situation where you have somebody who's not trained in EQ skills, who's promoted into a position of managerial position with maybe 30 or 40 people, but they've had no training. They may have had training to manage the kitchen, but not the people. And they say, oh God, you'll learn on the job. Well, do you know something, Chris? You don't learn on the job. And if you do, at whose expense is it? And how many people is that organization going to lose? How many people are going to vote with their feet? I don't know the answer to that. There's no statistics on that. But I'm going to say to you, performance is going to go down, productivity is going to go down. And ultimately, the part that everybody wants is profitability. And if that's going to go down as well, then all of a sudden, people may then start saying, oh, maybe we need to think about our people. And the answer is too jolly right. You do need to think about your people, because they're the ones that make your business into the business that it is. They're your reputation. Because if you don't use your people and value your people and make your people feel a part of that organization and valued and not a number, then where are you going with it? Not very far, I'd say.
It's so interesting you should mention, I mean, people are the greatest asset that we have, because you can't run a business. I mean, you can run a business without many people, but not a successful one, especially not in hospitality. Not in hospitality. I pulled speaking at a conference about productivity and retention, actually, and there was an interesting stat by Brandon Hall Group that said that companies that prioritize recognizing and rewarding their employees are 41% more likely to see increased employee retention and 34% to see increased employee engagement, which is, it just takes time. That's not money. That's not investment. As you say, it's a zero investment. It's just time. But managers need to be taught the benefits of that and how to do that effectively the right way. And simply rewarding someone in hospitality who might be a recovering alcoholic with a free drink is not the best way of rewarding and recognizing. It's more likely going to drive a wedge between them and the organization. So we just need more education out there and more training around.
Yes, it's training. It's really, everybody should be taught how to listen. And I mean listen, which means attentively listen. And listening is not with a phone and a computer and all that in one hand and calling somebody else and you're still talking to that person. And listening is key. And so many managers I know are promoted because they've got the technical skills. They're very good technically. So they've got the IQ skills, they've got the technical skills. But when you start coming down to managing people, it's different. It's not pressing a button on a computer. It's not putting a phone on, turning a phone on and off. It is actually relating to somebody. It's engaging with somebody. You want to stop the people walking. So you can come up with as many statistics that work, and people do listen to statistics. However, I'm still going to say behind every statistic is that person. And it really is. Because if you think a manager can manage without EQ skills, they can't. And my many years experience shows me that. So therefore I can say, and once you can get a manager who listens to what you're saying and appreciates, and I mean appreciates the value, appreciates the impact, appreciates the huge effect it's had on another human being because you've listened to them for 5 minutes. Everybody can afford 5 minutes. I'm not saying if you've got a fire in the kitchen, but I'm saying everybody can afford 5 minutes. The key to the 5 minutes is recognizing the need. Have you got 5 minutes? Which means that manager needs to know how to start a conversation, the middle of the conversation, and bring that conversation to an end within 5 minutes. He or she may just be able to take the lid off the problem and say, let's make another time. They've been trained to know how to do that. Because so many managers will say to me, Carole, yeah, I can start asking people, how are you? I can't wait long enough for an answer, but I haven't got time. And I say, you can't afford not to have time. And if you're not going to have that conversation with them on that particular Thursday morning because you're putting a fire out in the kitchen, that's not the right time. Then make another time. They are simple tools. And it's going to, if you've got to make time to save time. So are people going to walk less? Yes. Do you want to hold on to your people? Of course you do. But first of all, you've got to choose the right people. Your person job fit, there can be nothing more important. You mentioned about the health and safety executive. You mentioned about risk assessment. Yeah, companies can have a risk assessment. They can do that. They can have policies. But if that policy stays in the drawer of the manager or stays in the HR manager, what helps that at all? There's no help whatsoever. Every policy needs to live and breathe every person in that organization. So the policy needs to breathe the company. So if you value people, talk about it. Make sure your notice boards are talking about it. Make sure that people feel valued. Make sure as a CEO, you come out of your office or away from your desk, wherever it is, and talk to people. I remember hearing a story years ago, whether this is true or not, it doesn't, but I do tell this one on platform, which is one of the directors of Marks and Spencer's in the Oxford Street branch, which is their flagship branch in London, comes down into the yard where there is a driver with his van. He's just going out to do some deliveries. He knocks on the window, and the guy recognizes it was his boss. It was the director of Marks and Spencer's. And he says to him, yes, what have I done type scenario? He says, nothing. He said, okay, well, how can I help you? So he says, I just came to say one thing. He said, okay, I came to say thank you. Now, I don't know if that story is true or not, but I can say to you what is true is the fact is that I have met so many managers and trained so many managers to say those two words, thank you. Because even when your kitchen is on fire and you've managed to put it out and you've managed everything, what I'd want your manager to do is to know and to think to themselves, I have to do one thing. Before I go home, I have to say thank you. And again, this is a true story. I remember training in the Middle East at one point, and I was talking about the importance of saying thank you. And a woman comes over to me at the end of the training course and says, Carole, I want to show you something. And I said, okay. And she opens up her notepad that she's been using, her notebook. And it's a written notebook, it's a long time ago, written notebook. And she has at the back of the notepad, thank you so much for coming in over the weekend. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. She had that from 5 years beforehand. Now, that is a true story. So thank you is really immeasurable. What does that take? It takes the thinking to know that you should do it. Because it doesn't take anything else. And you need to be genuine, sincere, make the time to do it, but know it's important. And is that going to raise your productivity of that employee? It will do so. What has it taken? It's taken, Chris, 2 words. Not a lot, but it's knowing that you have to say those 2 words.
Yeah.
And then feels on cloud 9.
And have the foresight and also the brain space to be able to do it right. And then that goes full circle. The reason why the stress mitigation and looking at personal and professional stress is so important, because if you don't value your own health and you don't value the importance of that, then it means that you haven't got the time to value the importance of your own team with something as simple and as effective as a thank you if it's done in the right way as well. I mean, we've just sent one of our trainers over to Barcelona. So I've just come back from Barcelona and we've just sent the trainer over to Barcelona, which is probably not the best use of time, but she sent a picture as soon as she got to the hotel she was training, and the hotel had sent her a little handwritten note saying, thank you for being here and thank you for training us. We're really looking forward to it. And please enjoy, we sincerely hope you enjoy your stay. And she was like, I just love my job. I'm training mental health first aid in Barcelona and people want me here. And that was just the most amazing thing. So, Carole, it would be remiss of me to finish this podcast before actually talking to you about ISMA. And so for those who haven't come across the organization before, can you explain a little bit about what it is that ISMA does, please?
Okay, ISMA stands for the International Stress Management Association. We are now celebrating this year its 50th anniversary, and it's isma.org.uk. And on the 6th of November this year, 2024, we will be having International Stress Awareness Day, and we'll be having our Stress Management Summit. So I'm very excited about that. We have it every year. We are also offering people the opportunity to submit an award for their own businesses. So therefore, if they feel that they've done something, if they're promoting health and well-being, if they're promoting resilience, if they're promoting stress management, then people can actually do that as well. So Stress Awareness Week is from the 4th to the 8th of November. Stress Awareness Day, the summit for Stress Awareness Day is actually on Wednesday, the 6th of November. So it's an opportunity to talk about stress, raise the profile. But what I'm also aware of is the fact is it's not just one day, it's not just 1 week. We need to be doing this each and every day and right throughout the year. That is the most important. So therefore, do we raise the profile of stress? a reduction and resilience with the press? Yes, we do. That's been, if you like, my vision for over many, many years, which has worked. But we've still got a long way to go. So when I say it's worked, we're still actually raising the profile, but we still got a lot to do. So anybody that wants to join us on Wednesday, get the right dates, Carole, Wednesday, the 6th of November, that's our stress summit.
Fantastic.
Now, it's our online stress summit. So if anybody thinks, oh, I can't be going here and I can't be going there, the answer is you haven't got to. It'll all be pre-recorded, and just join us either way whenever you want to.
Yes. Well, I think that's a fantastic point, and something that I would urge everyone to get involved with, because you could learn so much and it could be transformative, not just for yourself, but also for your organizations. And thank you, technology, for allowing us that opportunity to be able to share that information. I was due to go to a trauma summit in Oxford, which was over 5 days talking from some of the leaders in the world about trauma and trauma-informed therapies. But alas, I couldn't make it. But because of technology, I can dial in and I can see some of the best leading minds around the world talking specifically about things like PTSD and things that have been caused by chronic stress without having to be there. So check out ISMA.
I also look forward to you actually presenting, so not to forget that you're presenting one of our sessions as well. So you're one of our contributors. So we are very, very, very grateful to you.
I'm very grateful to be recognized and asked to do so. I hope that my insights will be valuable to the audience, because I suppose the great thing about hospitality is it's all done behind the scenes, this mystical world that seems to just tick along. And it's it'd be interesting to be able to speak to doctors and other professions and be able to give them an insight into some of the challenges and learn what has and hasn't worked in their sectors and their businesses as well. I'm conscious you're a very busy woman. TV appearances, radio appearances very regularly. Obviously, you've written a book as well. But so before I let you go, where can people find more content from you and various different formats?
Okay, well, if people are interested in ISMA and they're interested to see you at the Stress Summit, which I'm sure they are, then just get in contact with isma.org.uk. So that really is Wednesday, the 6th of November. That's the Global Online Stress and Wellbeing Summit. So we look forward to seeing people there. And again, if you can't make the day, it's not a problem, because you can have it all recorded. It will all be recorded, use technology, and then just basically learn from some of the experts and hear from some of the experts. As far as I personally am concerned, it's Carole Spiers, Carole, Spiers, Spiers, group.co.uk. And if you're interested in some of the things that I've been talking about, some of the issues like managerial training, train managers so that they have their EQ skills. How can we reduce stress? How can we build resilience? There may not be any miracle cures, but there's an awful lot we can do to help people and to actually give them that skill set. And it is only right that if people are given the responsibility of being a manager and being a leader, leaders need to know how to listen, which means we have to give them time away from their work in order they can do that, in order that when they actually say to one of their team, how can I help you? They really know how to keep quiet, listen, and actually listen to what they've said. But they need to be able to manage that because they've been trained. So I do say that I think there's nothing more important than managers having their EQ skills and being trained.
Yes, 100%. We're delivering resilience training at the moment, and part of that is ANTS, so automatic negative thoughts. And it's amazing, actually, that aha moment that you see in the room where people go, wait, I've never observed my own thought process before. I've never listened to the voice or my perspectives and being able to sit back and go, hold on, that's a perspective. It's not my way. So do definitely, check out Carole, check out her website, check out everything that this incredible lady has to offer, because to say that she created the Stress Awareness Month is not an understatement. And to say that she's an expert in this field is, I would say again, is probably a lot less than you probably deserve, Carole. So I want to say thank you very much for your tireless campaigning on this particular subject, one that has affected and impacted so many lives and still needs more awareness shed on it. So thank you very much.
My great pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, having your listeners to be the audience. And just if everybody can take away one thing that they're going to do from this particular podcast, then one would say it's really been a worthwhile conversation. So I really greatly appreciate you to actually speak to your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll see you very soon.
You will indeed.